In the build-up to the new season of Doctor Who, I'm taking a look back at every episode from Season 1 and re-reviewing them all after a year of dwelling. Spoilers ahead for the whole series. Episode 7, The Legend of Ruby Sunday by Russell T Davies. This is the first part in the two-part finale to the series, a highly anticipated finale at that. Given the overarching story of Ruby's lineage, the groaning TARDIS and the recurring woman, we had a lot to be excited for. But was it worth the wait? In a word, yes. In a few words, yes, but also absolutely not. This episode is not a proper episode. It's 45 minutes of pure build-up. The first time, it's pretty good. I loved it the first time I watched it, but on a rewatch I was so disappointed. From the very first moment, it does something very cool. It throws us right in the deep end and finally acknowledges the question we all had. Who is this mysterious woman that keeps showing up? The show even draws attention to the very obvious anagram of TARDIS in the form of S-Triad. Now what I like about this is that a good portion of the fanbase had already clocked this anagram from long before the show even started, when S-Triad had been spotted during filming. So what this episode does is it turns that on its head and almost takes the piss out of how obvious the connection is. I like this. It's almost like the episode showing off, trying to get ahead of everyone who thought they were cleverer than the show itself. The mini cliffhanger leading into the opening credits is the notion that Susan Triad might actually be Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter. Again, I really like this. It's exciting. And for the first time in God knows how long, we're on track to see Susan again. Of course that didn't happen, but I'm sure it's going to in the next season. Anywho, The Legend of Ruby Sunday never gets any better from this point, unfortunately. I really enjoyed it the first time I saw it, but that's really because it served wonderfully as a build-up to a reveal, which if you don't know where it's going, it's hard not to be engaged by. However, once you do know where it's going, it becomes painfully clear that this episode has nothing else going for it. Obviously visually it's pretty good, some nice performances, good enough character work with the Doctor and Ruby trying to discover the identity of Ruby's mum and the Doctor feeling weird about the possibility of Susan Triad being his granddaughter, but that's really not as exciting as it was the first time. It feels like there was really only 5 minutes of worthwhile Doctor Who in this, with the rest taken out and replaced by a series of questions that immediately get debunked before another question is then asked. What does S-Triad mean? TARDIS. Is the woman your granddaughter? No. Why is Mrs. Flood acting weird? Don't worry about it, it won't be resolved in this series. Why is the TARDIS groaning? Sutek. This episode is just such a straightforward, this happens, then this happens, then this happens kind of deal, which is fine in some cases, and surely was the first time I watched it, but that doesn't really give it any longevity, and like a lot of the marketing for this series would suggest, this finale feels like it exists just to jangle keys in front of the audience in an attempt to build hype around those promised big reveals. Don't get me wrong, I really like a lot of it. At times it can be very tense, and I love the time window stuff. Visually very exciting, and the idea of the time windows is also very much what I love about Doctor Who. Of course it was great to see Kate Stewart again and the rest of UNIT. Maurice Gibbons was a fun new addition to the crew. I also really like the stuff with Susan Triad. While on a rewatch it's a little bit tedious and boring because again it is just fluff to build up hype and mystery, I've got to say it is quite well done, and Susan Twist does a really good job in this role. Obviously the fact the actor is called Susan Twist and she is in fact playing a Susan Twist is hilarious, but also not a new observation, so I'll move on. Anyway, like I said, this was fun. One thing about Doctor Who, specifically Russell T Davies written Who, is that even an episode with a poor story, or even just a bad episode in quotes, is usually still fun to watch. And while I think The Legend of Ruby Sunday suffers a lot from being boring in some cases, due to the narrative of this episode not really going anywhere beyond starting the plot of the subsequent one, I do still find it fun to watch, and enjoyed my time with it the second time round, more or less. I wish it was doing more, but Doctor Who in this state, looking this way with this cast, it's hard not to be entertained. So that is the good stuff. I've mentioned the main issue I have with the episode in terms of pacing and the fact it's not a proper episode beyond the build-up, but there's one big key issue with this episode that I haven't touched on yet. I'll go into it a lot more in the next video as this does really apply more to the second half of the story, but the Sutek reveal. I do not like the whole wrong anagram thing. I think in the moment it's kind of fun because from the beginning we've been thinking about it all in the context of there being an anagram. But to me it feels like a very cheap, very meta attempt at a reveal. It blurs the lines a little too much between the in-show events and the external interactions with the show. We're Doctor Who fans, we're gonna speculate, but having the show be so aware of this is always a risky game. Drawing attention to it briefly at the start by saying how obvious the S-Triad anagram is was okay, funny in fact. But having the cliffhanger, the big moment and reveal of this episode, be a direct call out to the audience in an attempt to say, haha look I tricked you, it was actually this instead. I don't know. I'd have rather there not be an anagram at all, to be honest. It's explained that this whole thing was a trap to get the Doctor, which is fine, and I can accept the anagram of TARDIS then, to get the Doctor investigating. But I don't really see why that meant we needed another anagram to secure the reveal. I understand the dramatics of it, of course, but for me it took me right out of the episode and just reminded me I was watching something written by another human, which is typically not the vibe I get from Doctor Who, and that's always been part of the magic of it. Of course, the reveal being Sutekh himself is still very cool, and while I have my issues with the whole lot in general, which is not for this episode, I do like this as a series finale villain. In this episode alone, there is nothing wrong with it, and it left me very excited for the next part. The Harbinger twist was fun again too, although I had already clocked this very early in the episode when there is a character called Harriet without a surname. Unfortunately, going forwards, any character beginning with H and we don't already know their surname, we have to assume they are one. Sadly, I think a lot of the reveals in this series, and possibly next series if I'm correct about my theories, have been a little bit too easy to guess. Is Russell T Davies losing faith in the audience's ability to work things out? I don't know. Looking back, a hell of a lot of the marketing in previous episodes of this series were hinting towards Sutekh. Hell, even the promotional posters with the colourful swirls behind the Doctor and Ruby are a reference to Sutekh. In the original cut of the Pyramids of Mars, when Sutekh gets banished into the time vortex, these colourful swirls are seen behind him. Nothing that anyone would pick up on until afterwards, but it's a nice reference in retrospect. Sutekh being on the TARDIS, being spotted in the time window, using Susan Twist as a harbinger, it's all very cool stuff, and looking at it as a build-up to a reveal and a stakes building exercise, I suppose, it's brilliant. Very tense, very exciting stuff in my opinion. So I'm very torn on this episode because in a lot of ways I really do like it, and I had such fond memories of it before my rewatch. But the cracks really did start to show after that when I saw the episode for what it really was, and that's a shame. Anyway, I'm going to have to cut this episode short because quite frankly there's not a lot else to say. Empire of Death is the far more content heavy episode and I have no idea how long my video will be for that. So we'll have to find out, but for now I'm giving The Legend of Ruby Sunday a 5 out of 10. A vital episode in the series in terms of setting up the finale, but beyond being a 45-minute setup, there is very little else of substance going for it. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you thought of The Legend of Ruby Sunday. Did you like it? Have you rewatched it since last year? Let's discuss. I've got my final video in this mini-series soon on the Empire of Death, so look out for that, but until then stay wibbly, stay wobbly, stay timey-wimey, and I'll see you in the next one.